All right, I lied, so shoot me. I am going to talk about France again today because the situation is deteriorating more rapidly than even I would have forecast. Um, Last night, I talked about France. I was still waxing philosophical about the whole issue. And I thought, hey, we'll check back in with France in a week, see how much worse things have gotten. But things got worse last night, and a lot worse. It is now apparently common in France to hear um, rocket fire as well as automatic gunfire just ringing out in the streets across France. This isn't just in, like the worst neighborhoods in Paris and the big city. No, no, no. People seem to be arming themselves across the country, and they are hyped for this insurrection. Now, as of yet, all we're seeing are people armed with black market weapons. AKs, Glocks. Saw one video a couple days ago of blank firing Glocks that had been converted to fire 32 ACP, which is, I think, pretty funny to see like a big like Glock 17, and then it's actually shooting little 32 ACP. But hey, it's like the Liberator. When you're behind enemy lines, you get a hold of whatever weapon you can, and you use it to shoot somebody and take their better weapon. That's kind of what guns like that are made for. You don't use a gun like that long term. Heck, I mean, where would you find that much 32 ACP to keep feeding your weapon throughout a long civil war? You don't. You ultimately kill a cop or a soldier, take his 9mm, and you steal 9mm from the bodies of your enemies throughout the war and from their armories. And that really, at this point, I didn't think we'd get here this quick. That's what I'm waiting for. I'm waiting to see these rioters who are well armed, but again, their arms are going to be limited. It's not like there's a ton of black market weaponry and ammunition that is being shipped in, and not enough to, maybe enough to fund gang wars, but not enough to fund a war on the French Republic. They need to take advantage and use the ammunition they have wisely. And their first target, I would think, if they're smart and organized, maybe they're not. Maybe these are just people acting out in fits of rage, and there's no real brains behind these folks. But I would think the people who are engaged enough to arm themselves to go out and buy black market AKs and Glocks and RPGs. And I've seen, I think I saw a couple PKMs. I haven't seen people shooting PKMs, but I've seen, TikTok videos. Not that I use TikTok, but showing up on Twitter of people with, belts of, 7.62 by 54R and PKMs riding around in, a convertible. I think I did see a saw, though, although they don't call it a saw over in Europe. I think they call it a mini-mag, because it's... I think it's still based on the FN mag, which, if you go back far enough, that's based on the BAR. Hard to imagine that there are variants of the BAR still in use, but FN makes them. Anyway, these Islamic rebels need to take an armory, and then once they break into one armory, they should be well armed enough to launch a serious assault on the French state. And then from there, they can keep going around capturing more and more caches of weapons throughout France. They shouldn't be that hard to take. I would imagine that France would not secure, too much their weapons that they have domestically, because they're like, well, who would try and steal them here? We're the good guys in France. And so once more of these rioters are armed, things will get even worse. And I'm not cheering for this, as I feel the need to keep reiterating this. I have no love for either side here. I happen to think that the migrants are worse, because I think that once they gain power, things will be worse. But I don't like the French either. Not the French state, not really in any form. I think that the French Revolution and its consequences have been a disaster for mankind. And I'm talking about the revolution of 1789, not the revolution of 2023. Let's be clear. In the past, French revolutions have been limited to Paris in many cases, and the rest of the country didn't even necessarily know that there was a regime change until news spread afterwards. Oh, you have a new king now, or oh, the king is dead. And oftentimes, outside of Paris, there are people who are still loyal to the old regime because nobody asked them if they wanted a new government ruled by crazy people. And then, you had to have the central regime in Paris come out to the country and put down all the hicks who refused to obey, Robespierre. But today in France, we are not seeing that same phenomenon. This started in Paris, sure, but it has not been limited to Paris. It's spread all across the country. Now, another interesting phenomenon that frankly, there's only one video of it so far, so it could be a totally isolated incident, but we've seen at least one example of people in France fighting back, trying to protect a storefront. A couple of guys with, the caption called them baseball bats in the video I saw, but I don't think they have baseball bats in France. I mean, I've never heard of France playing baseball, so I assume there's something else. They're sticks about the length of a baseball bat, let's call them that. And I don't think this will happen because I just don't think it's in France's DNA to rise up against violent evildoers. But I would like to see more of this. It would be nice to see people start to fight back. You would think at some point something has to snap inside of the ordinary Frenchman and to where they go, you know what, so far and no further, I've had enough. But the French people never seem to hit that point. And frankly, it's not even fair to limit that analysis to the French at this point, because from what we've seen over the past few years, the entire West is infiltrated with this. I mean, we here in America, we had that video, was it this week or last week, of the white man who called the cops on a homeless person of color who threatened him with a knife, threatened his life. I think he shouted "die" or something, and held a knife up to him. And the white man broke down in tears and cried as the police put handcuffs on the homeless assailant. And he said, "No, I didn't want him to go to jail, please." It was the most pathetic thing I've ever seen. And I think that encapsulates the attitude, the state of Western masculinity. The only people with any testosterone flowing through their veins in the West are these migrants. They're only 9% of the population. You would think that there would be mobs of young Frenchmen that dwarf the size of these migrant roving gangs, meeting them in the streets to combat them, to protect their streets, to protect their neighborhoods, their families. But no, they're all cowering inside their houses, except for these two guys with sticks guarding a storefront. If you cower and hide in your house, that's not going to protect you from the bullets falling from the sky, because I've seen so much celebratory gunfire of these migrants just firing wildly into the air. Those bullets that go up, guess what? They come down somewhere, and they could land right on your head. So you may as well be out fighting in the streets. You never know. If you're cowering and hiding in your closet, they could set fire to your house, and you don't even know it. And then, you just die of smoke inhalation. There is no sitting this one out. You may as well get up off your couch. I'm sure that, like in the United States, the police in France have no obligation to protect civilians. Now, it's not unprecedented for a small minority around, let's see. At the end of apartheid, how small were the white people as a minority in South Africa? I think they were still well over 10%. I know when it started, they were much higher, like 25% or 20%. And over the course of, the World War II and the Cold War, because I think when apartheid officially started, it was like 28, right? But going back before that, white people are always in charge in South Africa anyway, even before apartheid officially existed. But my point is here, you can have a small minority rule over the majority of society. The French are not saved just because, we make up 90% of our country. It's like, you kind of need to make up, 99% of your country. Or you need to assert yourself. But if you're just going to be a spineless dead fish, you're kind of screwed. I don't know what else to say. It's a matter of who controls the weapons. If you let the 9% go and raid your armories and they arm themselves, well, guess what? An armed 9% beats a unarmed 91% 100% of the time. We've seen this movie before. And Macron just seems completely ignorant of the situation. He's going and awkwardly dancing at an Elton John concert, while France burns, as if he were like, what was his name? Bob Chapek. He went into an Elton John concert as the CEO of the Walt Disney Corporation and walked out as a nobody, because while he was in that concert, guess what? People who matter got together and said, you know what? Let's not have Bob Chapek be CEO of Disney anymore. Let's just get rid of him. And that all happened while he was in the concert. So guess what, Macron? One day you might walk into an Elton John concert, the president of France, and you might walk out a nobody, replaced by the first Sultan of Gaul. What's that old saying? If the Gauls were so great, why were they defeated by the Romans? People will say the same in 50 to 100 and 500 years from now, after, perhaps on the occasion of the crowning of the 34th Sultan of Gaul. People will say, hey, remember France? Remember that country that used to exist here? Remember those people, the Frenchmen? They had a long history. They seemed like they were pretty great, huh? No, actually. I think someone would turn to that member of the audience and say, what, if the Frenchmen were so great, why did we replace them? Why were we able to defeat them? Obviously, we're better. And that will be the truth. The French are not the original inhabitants of the country that is currently known as France. There was a people before them that they defeated, and perhaps there will be a new people who will defeat the French and plot that territory, claim it for a new people, a new nation of Semites and Bantus. And who knows? Maybe if the French ever get their acts together, they could reclaim their country through some kind of reconquista. But wouldn't it be much better? Wouldn't it be much easier just to hang on to what you've already got, rather than having to try and fight to take it back later? The other thing I'm waiting for is there needs to be some sort of leader of the revolution to galvanize these people, to unite them, to try and lead them in some kind of direction, because currently there is no direction. I'm looking for some kind of... I don't know if a cleric would be able to do it, because I don't think that the French underclass is religious enough. I think that that's perhaps one thing that has been imparted upon them to a limited degree by the French, is that they are probably less religious than their cousins back in the old country. That, and I don't think that all of these migrants are actually Islamic. I don't think that's the case at all. Majority Islamic, but I don't think all of them. And so I think they need some sort of just non-French political leader inside of France to rally them, to give them a purpose, and to, lead the charge to storm the Bastille. If it can happen in the 18th century, I think it can happen in the 21st century when we have much better communications. So anyway, with that said, I will see you folks back here tomorrow.